there was a lot of big game being talked about protecting Virginia's immigrant communities, and we thought, hey, this is
Yes.
something that we need to address. Other states have taken action on this. It has been sanctioned by at least one federal court, perhaps more now. It's constitutional. It's a perfectly fine exercise of the Commonwealth's sovereign authority to regulate what happens in its judicial system. And the GA heard that call. They passed it. We worked really closely with not
Yes.
just our team, but legal experts across the country, as well as in the General Assembly. It was a package put on the governor's desk, and she declined to sign it into law, which is extremely troubling for a lot of reasons.
The Friday Power Lunch is recorded before a live Zoom audience. The Friday Power Lunch. Badass women getting things done.
Talking about it, 'cause they can't tip on the scene. What you talk about it, talking about it. When you get elevated, they love it or they hate it. You dance up on them haters, keep getting funky on the scene while they jumping around you. They trying to take all of your dreams, but you can't allow it. 'Cause baby, whether you're high or low, or whether you're high or low, you got to chip on the tightrope. Chip on the tightrope. Baby, baby, whether you're high or low, baby, whether you're high or low, you got to tip on the tightrope. Now let me see you do the tightrope. And I'm still dipping on it. See, I'm not walking on it or trying to run around it. This ain't no acrobatics. You either follow or you lead. Yeah, I'm talking about you. Or keep on blaming the machine. Yeah, I'm talking about it. Talking about it. I can't complain.
That is great.
I know. I mean, really, we need that kind of lift when we feel like, too, trying to find that balance is really hard in this work.
Yeah, I would say that this week, last week, the week before, and the week before that.
That's so true, right? It's like the work, the life of an activist. It's funny because it feels like some things are just out of your control. Some things that we can't help politically, and we're always working through progress. We always tell, we talk about voting, we talk about our work, we're always trying to sort of say we're always marching toward that progress. And man, it feels like, and then of course, under the umbrella of a fascism, and our show is really kind of round up with democracy as a verb. So we all know that from history, but it doesn't feel like, man, that it is hard. It is really hard to move through that, but we have to have that courage, works around community, and then, choosing our values of how we kind of enter these kind of rooms of power or conversations, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what I really like about this. I was talking
Yeah.
to Robin earlier this morning, and we were really talking about how big the Democratic tent is. And
Yes.
it is so big, but we sort of tend sometimes to talk like it's everybody is the same thing. And I do think that this song, but as well as understanding your lane and your strengths, is so important so that we can talk to people the way that they want to be talked to and that they hear us because the things that we are saying matter to them. So I think that's what the tightrope feels like to me is
Yeah.
understanding the different lanes that we need to operate in so that we can do them very well, understanding that we do have a North
Yeah.
Star, but how do you get there?
Yeah, and I think the mental health part of it is really important. I think that a lot of us feel exhausted, and when we talk about even when our rights are under attack, we could again when we see the direct attack on voting rights and really Black people in general. Let's just say this is white supremacy. We talked about this US Supreme Court wearing the hoods on their Black robes. I mean, we have to call it what it is. And then today, when we see some decisions around policy, or this week, where the administration is going after transgender people again. These kind of things for those people in those that are living that life, that's a mental attack, a physical attack. It's exhausting. And I can't imagine when we talked about this the other day, how you really felt about that. And it was really, as we say, getting in, really present that if you're a MAGA, you're a racist at this point and you have no space for this. I mean, let's just get honest. Oh, we want to say it. What is it? You're going to get the double bird.
I give them the
Let's talk
double
about
bird.
let's talk about the double bird a couple minutes. Everybody, if you want to feel good, we're going to give you some ways to feel better. Let's talk about the double bird.
So this is sort of what I was thinking. I went for a walk and I have a lady who's a neighbor, and she gave another neighbor the double bird. And when they thought something was wrong with her, but she found out that they were Republicans and voted against a lot of things. And so the next time she saw them, she gave them the double bird. And so I
Love
thought it
it.
was funny, and I thought, well, I'm going to write about that. So I did this thing, the quiet part, which is
Right,
called, I hope I don't offend you, but it's the quiet part out loud. It's just
right.
really making a funny out of all of the things that people do that we should really talk about, but we sort of have to be nice sometimes. But we need to think about when is it going to be a good time to give a fictional double bird in terms of the
Well,
way that we talk about things, the way that we
yes.
should not let things go unsaid. And so it's a really interesting, funny article that I wrote. And so if you haven't
Well,
read it yet, it's about giving people,
funny
yeah,
always works in these
yeah.
kind of spaces because one, it makes us feel good too. It really gets the point across that, the fictional bird, flipping the bird. And I told you I had the vision of the shirt we need to wear with two birds. It's the double bird. And I wanted to know about the triple bird. When somebody gets the triple bird, we'll give that triple bird out. But speaking of double birds, are there anything on your mind this week that you want to talk about? That's who gets a double bird this week?
Well, you know who gets a double? I'm sorry, but most all of the Republicans get a double bird. There are a few people who are really good, but MAGA gets
Yes,
the double bird for me this weekend. But fascism gets the double bird, and that's why I'm
double
so
bird, triple
excited to
bird.
talk to Bren. I read the book,
Yes.
and honestly, well, we get to say this later, but she's really brilliant. And I think everyone who hasn't had a chance to read her book, if you want to get a really good understanding of where we are and how we might find our way out and how you might understand how the dots are connected. I mean, it's a bit of a terrifying read in a way, but we
Yes.
need to understand the truth and we need to be able to speak the truth, which is really what the Double Bird is about too. It is about speaking the truth. And
Yes.
sometimes it's uncomfortable.
You got to
But
speak the
we have
truth.
got to do that more. We
Mhm.
have got to be louder about who we are and what we believe, because the folks who should be hiding are people who support MAGA and Republicans who support that.
Yeah, let's say that first. That's where we want to focus. And then I have to laugh. Alexandra Ritchie just made me crack up. She goes, three birds and you're out. Three birds. I love that. I love that. And I do agree. We talk about the book today, and I know you're going to introduce our wonderful guest coming in today, Bryn Tannehill, and we also have Chris Kaiser here, Policy Director of ACL of Virginia. Really a great matchup, and we're talking about what is on our mind when we talk about immigrant rights, ICE, some of the bills that we talked about. And if you're from Virginia, we're in Virginia, but our team comes from other states as well. We have a national show here. Is that we have some bills that we've been really talking about. Speaking of a lot of birds, if you're on social media, you see a lot of birds flying. People are, kind of weighing in on how they feel about these policies that Governor Spanberger didn't sign, these bills, the vetoes. So there's a lot of things that we can unpack about that. We can do a whole show on that. But I think the feeling that I'll just convey about that is how important communication is and relationship building is. And I'm hoping that that people will come together. There's still time. And if the door is open, I wish our governor would have said when asked about the bills and people feeling betrayed by her vetoes, that she would have said, my door is open. So if anybody can hear me, I hope everybody opens their door right now, because you know what? Everybody that voted and did all this work deserved from all the leaders, not just one, to get in the room and figure this out. So that's my double bird.
Yeah, and Catherine, I would just say, because you're saying that it's this,
Yeah.
this is this election. We still have the
Yeah.
House election coming up for
Yes,
Virginia
I
and the
know.
state Senate coming up. So we have to be strategic in the thinking about all
Strategic.
of this so that we can keep them. And you keep them by keeping your word and your promises. And if you can't, what you do is you come out and you talk to people together and say, this is what we're working on. We have to build
Mhm.
whatever the environment and the culture that we want to have here. And that happens at the top of the house. And so, yeah.
Well, our top of the house all the way, and we'll just wrap up because I know in the after chat we'll talk more about it. But from Ken Martin up with that whole thing of the Topsy report coming out, and then it's sort of like, man, you feel like everybody's still in a silo. When we got into this, we saw the silo-ness of it. But as people that fight for progress and for people's rights, and then we have to deal with people that are elected in this office to get it done, we expect that to happen. And I think that this is where we should put the pressure on folks. But the actual double bird goes to MAGA because they're promoting fascism. To fight it, we have to be strategic. If we're not being strategic, what the hell is all I'm going to say. So Um, but I'll give you the last word and then I'm going to get our show going.
No, I don't have any. I'm
You
gonna
got
say them
no,
all. I got
no
no, I got
double bird.
nothing.
Okay, I'll get it. Double bird. That's the last word for today. Everybody's going to fly the coop. Um, I'm so glad you're here. I'm Catherine White.
Vanell Norton.
And we're here for Network Nova Live. We are bringing you the Friday Power Lunch every week. We love to fuel grassroots activism across Virginia, across the nation, and we like to have fun doing it. Rules of the road, use the chat, communicate. Tell us how you're walking that tightrope, how you're feeling. But if you get nasty or bashy, we'll throw your butt out. We have no problem with that because we like to also have a good vibe and treat each other well. And support the show. If you're a Patreon, thank you so much for supporting us. It means so much every week. That goes into our cup and helps us pay our bills, and we really appreciate that. And remember to follow us on Substack. If you get our emails but you're not subscribed on the app, go over to our YouTube, like us, subscribe, share, go over to our Substack. We really want to make sure that people are getting our publication. And right now, it's free, everybody. But again, thank you to our patrons. Today, democracy is a verb. That's how we act. We need that courage, community, and choosing our values. And man, this feels like more than a podcast today. It feels like a great conversation. We're so excited to get in the room. Bryn Tannehill, Naval Academy graduate, former naval aviator, author and senior defense analyst, and author of American Fascism: How the GOP is Subverting Democracy. It's her double bird book. Chris Kaiser, policy director, ACLU of Virginia. Man, what a background Chris has. I mean, what an organizer, civil rights guy, all the way back to Louisiana. I just loved that he is on the show today. And also, we're going to do a segment of the Women's Summit, Big 10. We have Laura Richardson, Laura Mack here to talk about our Shop, Live, Vote Your Values Expo that will be at the Women's Summit August 21st through 23rd. If you don't have your ticket, what are you doing with your life? Please get a ticket. And remember, we would love your input, but buying a ticket to our summit, it invests in the work we do. And then we don't have to go chase sponsors that may not live our values, but you all do. Buy that ticket. Can't come buy a ticket and donate it. Thank you very much for that. So I'm going to hand it over to my friend, Vanell Norton.
Thank
Go
you very
for it.
much. So, as I said already, I'm so excited to get to talk to Bryn Tannehill, and Catherine has already explained all the things that she does. I want to really talk about her book, though, and she'll talk about some other things too. So, Bryn, before we get started, I'm just going to give you a few minutes just to sort of introduce yourself, and then I have got so many questions for you. So many, so many. So, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I will get started.
So my name's Bryn Tannehill. I'm all the things that was said there, but not anymore. I'm also a trans person who's in the process of being kicked out of the National Guard. I'm a medevac pilot. I've also fled to Canada with my family. Um, and part of being kicked out and what's being done is all the trans people who are being kicked out from the military at this point, regardless of their qualifications, deployability, skills, fitness reports, are being given discharge codes that basically prohibit them from ever working in government or defense ever again. So I am no longer in Virginia because there's nothing left for me there.
So all of that, but you're brilliant, which says what a loss for the military, because you are. Anybody who reads the book will know that. So I want to talk about the book because when I started reading the book, and then I said to my husband, when did she write this? Because all this stuff is happening right now. And so because you're sort of this mind that you have really looks into the future. You can read between the lines. That's what I said to my husband. I said, things are happening. She's reading between the lines to see all the things that are happening. What I want you to do is to connect the dots right now, because in the book, you talk about the civil rights movement and you talk about slavery and you talk about how this is all connected to where we are today. So why don't we start there?
Sure. So American fascism tries to trace the US to how it got to this moment, right? And the first three chapters are really, really heavily focused on slavery and the civil rights movement and how the religious right grew up around basically being pissed about losing their slaves. And then more recently, the Civil Rights Movement and the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. And this is the genesis of it. It was desegregation of schools that is the genesis of the modern conservative movement as it exists today, right? And when I wrote this book over the period between about 2018 and finished it off and published it in 2021, um, Republicans were still pretending kind of
Mhm.
that this wasn't about race. But after watching what just happened with the Supreme Court and the rush to eliminate virtually every remaining Black majority district anywhere in the South, we can see that it was always about that. Now, I don't talk very much about trans people in the book, but that's become more relevant as trans people have filled the role that Germany used with
Mhm.
Jews. And we can discuss how that relates to the Democratic Party going forward and how to think about that in historical context. But the book also looks at the history of the religious right. It looks at how oligarchs are the driving economic force behind the Republican Party and why it behooves them to support a fascist movement. It looks at how the Constitution and the court system is allowing the absolute degradation of democracy. And it's very, very deliberate, right? And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse over time. Um, it looks at the characteristics of fascism, and one of the things that I did was I read every book I could get my hands on that looked at what defines fascism,
Mhm.
what makes something fascism, right? And I kind of built what the consensus of what are the characteristics of fascism across the vast majority of the literature, right? And so there's 13 characteristics we could talk about. And it talks a little bit about what it's going to take to save the United States. And I wrote another article that kind of reiterated it just a couple of months ago. And the short version is if by some miracle the 2028 election is not subverted, whoever comes in the door cannot be another Joe Biden. I love Joe as a person. He was not up to the moment. We need someone who's going to kick in the door, pack the court, eliminate gerrymandering and start working to institute things like proportional representation, eliminating the filibuster, taking out the very most of the undemocratic aspects of the U.S. government cannot be fixed without a constitutional amendment. The way the Constitution is written in a way, the country is bifurcated between two parties that hate each other. There is no mechanism left to amend the Constitution. So all we can do to fix the US is nibble around the edges. And the things that I point out are the very, very few things that we might be able to do. The reason I'm in Canada is because at this point I have zero faith that the US will be able to fix itself before trans people end up, you know, in very, very bad places.
So let's go back because here's what I want to know, and you really do talk about this because in the book it's an analysis of everything and it's a warning. And I'm hoping that through all of this, because this is what I think that, I have hope that we can figure out, at least look at it strategically down the road. But what I really want you to also talk about is how all of this happens. So for example, it doesn't just happen overnight. It happens a little by little. But how do you see helping people understand what's happening? So, for example, we are having these big conversations about affordability. I listened to a woman this morning say, "I voted for Trump, and he's gonna need to fix this," or she is not going to vote for anybody else. When the next election comes, she's going to still vote for Trump. So, how is it that we get to sort of the ways to actually show people what's happening? Because it feels like more people are with us in terms of how we think we should live versus the people who are the minority and are the smaller group. How do you think about through your analysis that we really get to people to know that it's more than about grocery prices?
So you don't. That's really the truth of the matter. That you talk about the woman who would vote for Trump no matter what. And one of the quotes that I refer to is one by LBJ. And this is a paraphrase, but LBJ remarked that you know, the low if you make the lowliest white man feel better than the best, and he used the word term Negro.
Hmm.
This was 1961, right, or
Hmm.
62. You can literally pick his pocket, right? And part of what makes MAGA MAGA is social dominance orientation. And that is a very, very powerful glue for that 30 to 35% of Americans that needs to feel special, that feels wronged, that feels grievance. And the entire media ecosystem is built into feeding that grievance, right? And breaking, and I wrote about, there's an article coming out in the New Republic. There's an entire and reality warping system where reality cannot penetrate this. And they're too far gone. We cannot reach those folks because they're the same place that LBJ noted 65 years ago. Um, I think for a lot of Americans who might be swing voters, and there's surprisingly few, um, is yeah, the price of groceries is going to be the deciding factor for their vote. But what I think Americans are going to be discovering, especially with the gerrymandering going on, and potentially with the interference in the 2026 and 2028 election, is that their vote may not matter anymore. We may be too far gone, right, for people to be able to change who is in government at the ballot box effectively. And that should be the thing. I said that we could still do it in 2020. We could do it in 2024. I'm not convinced that we're going to have free and fair elections going forward, and especially not in 2028.
So
Um,
here's my question, Brent. So I'm going to read something to you, and then I'm gonna ask you the question. And this was a quote that you used by Isaac Asimov. It says, "There is a cult of ignorance in the United States, and there has always been. The strain of anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge." Now, these people are not as smart as you. They're not as brilliant as you. You can see some of the future, which is why you're in Canada. But if you were giving advice to us to say, okay, I may not feel so optimistic about this, but here are some things that if I was talking to people, I would say, I want you to go and focus on these things. What would you tell our very optimistic North Star audience that are the things that they should go and be thinking about and doing?
so I wrote an article for Public Notice that talks about why Hungary isn't a really, really good analogy for the US because the Republican Party in the US holds some advantages that structurally that the Fidesz party in Hungary didn't. But as a election talking point, um, economics and corruption are things that can penetrate the public consciousness. You mentioned in the pre-roll the Democratic autopsy. I looked at that and I just shook my head because Paul Rivera, I mean, if I was him, the level of ignorance he willingly displayed would be enough to make me find the nearest bridge and throw myself off of it while pretending to be an expert. He referred to transgender people as transgendereds. Um, that's while saying pontificating that I understand national politics and transgender people and LGBT people while using a term that's grammatically incorrect, offensive, archaic, and indicates he's never interacted with anybody in the LGBT community for more than a few minutes. Um, the Democratic Party is still demonstrates that it's still completely ignorant on LGBT issues. Um, Part of the reason I'm in Canada is because I'm seeing the US going down some of the same pathways Germany did. I wrote about it for Dame. There's so many parallels between how trans and people are being marginalized out of society and Jews were. And people say, well, this isn't relevant, right? Trans people are not relevant. I'm like, well, yes and no. The way I think about it is, what was the fate of the Jews between 33 and 45 relevant? And the answer is in the big picture to the scope of the war, no. Right? It was 0.5% of the population. They were a convenient scapegoat. The 90% of them were annihilated. and it had little tangible impact on the war, the economy, other than Nazis ending up with some expensive artwork, right? Powerful Nazis. Um, the eradication of the trans community, same impact in the economic and quantitative sense, but morally, we're going down that same road. And that's
So so
the
then so then
unquantifiable piece.
so tell me this. And so because the Democratic Party gets it wrong, how do they get it right? What is the right thing that they should be doing and saying?
So the number one thing they should be doing is they should be holding the line. The vote yesterday to force schools to out trans students. We talked about it in the pre-roll. A highly disproportionate number of abused and homeless teens are LGBTQ. I can tell you flat out that my parents told me they'd rather have a dead kid than a gay one. Surprise, different kind of gay than they expected. I'm a lesbian.
Mm.
But the point stands that that abandoning your base, right, is going to undercut you because these are the voters that you have to have turn out. So turning on trans people will not save you. And the Labor Party has done that in England, right? Trans people nowhere in the country can hold a job or basically go out of the house ever again because they've been cut off from all bathrooms. And at this point, they're like, yeah, a porta potty somewhere out back 3 miles away. Yeah, that's suitable, separate but equal, right? Um, and in the US, it's going to be that, but worse. But it isn't saving labor. Labor is dying. They're about to be in third place behind the Greens, right? Reform UK is eating their lunch and destroying them. And in part because the public that was the base of labor, that was kind of the left-leaning base, sees that they had absolutely no loyalty whatsoever to the people who put them in power.
So let me ask this. So I think there is work to be done on all sides in terms of how Democrats, how family, friends talk about transgender LGBTQ and LGBTQ in this moment. Because I think we obviously don't know what we're doing, and we are obviously getting it wrong. And so Catherine was talking openly earlier about communication, and it really is about communication to figure out how we get all of this right, which is really what equality is. Let me ask a question about personal accountability, which is really what I'm talking about here. So, what is it that we do, that we must do to take personal accountability for the things that we can do in this moment?
So I think the number one thing that we can do in a moral sense is speak truth. Don't be afraid to speak truth. Call it what it is. This is fascism. This is an auto golpe or an autocratic takeover of the United States. This is corruption. That this is a moral inflection point for the United States. That being honest, that if we do not emerge from this, um, that this is kind of it for the US. Benjamin Franklin said it's a republic if you can keep it, and he was absolutely right. Um, that and if the election does get stolen, right? If somehow it's clear to everyone that Donald Trump or Don Jr. or JD Vance should not be president, but they're sworn in anyway on January 20th, 2029, the US at that point has a choice. Do we accept permanent fascism forever under a one-party rule system forever and watch the rights of minorities and women and black people get ground into the dust as we become this hideous, theocratic, fascist dystopian nightmare, right? And workers with no hope of voting ourselves out of the mess we made for ourselves? Or do we start going to our blue state politicians and saying, yeah, this is time to end the American experiment? And I talk about this in my book, is at what point does secession become the lesser of many, many, many evils, or soft secession, or hard secession? But that's the direction we're heading because I guarantee that the 2028 election, excuse my language, there's going to be some serious fuckery. There's going to be a lot of it. I wrote about for the Byline Times all the options that they have to engage in this, and that the odds of getting to a point in January 2029 where we're swearing in a Democratic president are actually remarkably slim. But it's not because people won't vote for that. This regime's remarkably unpopular. It's because they have so many different options to short circuit the election and the election results.
So here's what I hear when you say that is that you're giving, which is why the book is so good. You also give analysis and you also give some tactics, which means that we know exactly based on what you say what is coming. And so the goal would be to figure out the ways to offset it because I don't think anything is ever inevitable. I have this whole thing that I talk about with David and Goliath, and I love the book, but I also love the notion that when people think that there is no hope, that you do things that are unexpected, which is what we really have to do, the unexpected things to make something happen. And so it will require a lot of courage. So if you had just to sort of give in my last few minutes, my last minute, your thoughts about what we should do to be courageous in this moment, what would you advise us to do? And it can't be to move.
So the courageous thing to do is do not obey in advance. That was Timothy Snyder's number one commandment, and we have failed miserably at it across the board, in the military, in private industry, in the media, everywhere, right? Everybody bends the knee to save themselves. And that is one of the key lesson drawn from oppressive systems. And I would go to the moment. So there's this picture of Hitler giving a speech at a shipyard, I believe, in 1934, 1935, right? And a crowd of everybody, giving the Roman salute, right? Except for one man who sits back and you see his arms crossed
Mhm.
and he's just standing there. He died in a concentration camp, but here's the point I would make is history went back, found that photo, saw what he did, figured out who he was, right? And you can find his name in Wikipedia. Everyone else in that picture who was snapping the salute is utterly forgotten by history because they were spineless, they were cowards. They did what they needed to do to survive. And that's the easy route. Take the hard route. Don't obey in advance. Don't go for convenient lies. Do not accept if they go for the trans people first, I'll be okay. It's just the trans people. It's just the immigrants. It's just the black people. It's just the women.
Yes.
Eventually, if you're on the wrong side of anything, they will come for you too.
So courage then. Courage and do not obey in
Do
advance.
not obey in advance.
Got it.
Yeah. Well,
Catherine, thank you, Bryn.
yes.
You're
I
welcome.
don't know if Bryn is going to be able to hang around for the
I
aftertime or not.
can.
Oh, perfect.
That is so great.
I'm good until about 13:30.
Okay,
Wonderful.
13:30. That's military time, everybody.
1:30
1:30.
Eastern.
I'm just teasing. I just came back from Italy. Most people understand that, but I love it. Thank you so much. That's our shirts, by the way. I'll just say we have a great shirt in our Badass Boutique that has on the back Timothy Snyder's "Do Not Obey in Advance." And maybe you know what, Stair, that's the master of the Badass Boutique. Let's send Bryn a wonderful one of our shirts because man, she'll love wearing it. At the beautiful front. Thank you, Bryn, so much.
I was going
Thank
to say
you.
thank you, Brent. We just all get a
Thank
whole
you.
lot
Yes.
smarter from listening to Brent. And I'm just going
And
to
thank
tell
you
you,
for reading
plug
my
the book
book
one more
cover to
time because it
cover.
really is awesome.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, Bryn, if you can or if we've done it because I haven't seen if it went through. The people buy the book. It's very approachable and this good summer reading. I'm teasing.
Yeah, light
You
reading.
get smarter, you get courageous, and you know what you need to do is what I would
It's
say.
yeah, the beach book, as as we say. Well, thank you, Fennell. I
You're
think that
welcome.
we are learning so much today, and you know me, I love the C word, courage, and community, communication. And when you come to the Women's Summit, August 21st, you're going to get a dose of courage, and that we hope we can see in the room for that. But to talk further about why it's so important to have courage and build around community and our rights, especially when we talk about our rights, is Chris Kaiser's here, policy director. Hey. So yeah, how are you doing? We got you with your shirt on. I love it. I love the shirt. We the Commonwealth, ACLU, Virginia Policy Director. And I was impressed when I heard about you, the Viva la Resistance crowd, turned me on to the work you're doing. We've had ACLU on before, but your resume is pretty deep and going back to being hired in Louisiana for the ACLU, your background in working for victims of sexual assault. I mean, it's really a wonderful resume. And now here with us to talk about what's going on in Virginia, especially when we're talking about ICE, immigrant community. Let's come right out of the gate. First of all, something powerful that's on your mind. I was thinking about Governor Spenberger allowing ICE to continue making arrests in Virginia inside courthouses. But let's really, so people understand what we're talking about. Talk about that bill. Talk about some of the stuff around so people understand what was on the table and what the veto means.
Yeah, no. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. And I have to
Yeah.
say, I was all set to talk about this bill. Tomorrow is technically the governor's deadline to act. So I was hoping we had an
Okay.
opportunity to advocate for this. And unfortunately, she decided to veto this important legislation on Tuesday. So it's been a week. And I also need to note, I was very happy to hear that Bryn was on as a pairing to this because, ostensibly this bill that we've been working on is about immigration enforcement. But more broadly, as Brim was just going through, this is an attack on the rule of law. And that's one of the reasons that it was so
Yes.
critical for the administration to step up, not only for Virginians, but to stand up against the federal government. So, just to level set what this bill was, if you hadn't seen it, it was essentially an attempt to stymie ICE's arrest operations, warrantless arrest operations in Virginia courthouses since they took office more than a year ago. Essentially, we have seen federal agents storming Virginia courthouses for more than a year, targeting folks that we know are overwhelmingly not even suspected of a crime. They're just blatantly racially profiling people and picking people up where they know that they will be in a controlled environment without any way to defend themselves or know what's happening. They're interfering with Virginia's court processes. We've heard about folks, and by the way, these are not like defendants in felony criminal investigations. These are people showing up to pay parking tickets. This is by and large a general district
Right.
court. They're people just doing their business at Virginia courts. We have heard of ICE agents recently in Arlington storming into the like bond appeal hearings on Tuesday mornings, picking people up when they know they're going to be here just trying to get out of jail. This is widespread. It's not localized to any particular part of the state. And so, we rolled into this past session knowing that we had a Democratic trifecta. There was a lot of big game being talked about protecting Virginia's immigrant communities, and we thought, hey, this is
Yes.
something that we need to address. Other states have taken action on this. It has been sanctioned by at least one federal court, perhaps more now. It's constitutional. It's a perfectly fine exercise of the Commonwealth's sovereign authority to regulate what happens in its judicial system. And the GA heard that call. They passed it. We worked really closely with not
Yes.
just our team, but legal experts across the country, as well as in the General Assembly. It was a package put on the governor's desk, and she declined to sign it into law, which is extremely troubling for a lot of reasons.
Well, I know since we have you here, and this is just not just the one bill that we've heard, similar stories around. I do want to kind of get an inside look on this process, meaning that obviously it sounds like a long history. You had a lot of legal experts weigh in, and I'm assuming that along the way that you worked with the governor's team, or how does it work? Do they have an advocate that comes from the team, sits with you, so you have the right direction, or is it just blindly done, give it, or how do you get to that part where you feel like that the governor's going to sign it? Like, what does that process look like?
Well, you probably heard from folks in other issue area spaces than this. It's been a real mixed bag this session. I
Mm.
mean, I think the first year of any gubernatorial administration is always a little bit exploratory. Folks are feeling out how
Sure.
we're going to work together. That's not abnormal at all.
Right.
I can only speak to our experience with this, that we at least I did not receive a lot of feedback one way or another. Late in session, it's my understanding that our bill patrons received a substitute version of the bill that was really just like gutted the whole thing. It was not enforceable. Felt like kind of a take it or leave it
Right.
offer, and there was not a lot of dialogue, unfortunately. So
Well,
I can only say so much about what the
right.
motivation.
I'm
But
just curious because I feel like, when we talk about communication, how we can improve and then how we can respond as activists, because we do want to send our calls to action for all the stakeholders, right? And because we obviously we're just like you, work very hard because we also understand what's on the table. After listening to Bryn, this isn't just a regular year. This is where we can actually protect people. We have this year, especially with elections coming up. I'm surprised at the fumble of this kind of very serious thing, protecting from, reproductive freedom, voting rights, LGBTQ rights, equality, constitutional amendment protections, like transgender rights. We hit it all. And we know what's coming at us. So you would think that we would take these precautions, right? So now, obviously, I see an EO come out by the governor. How does that executive order impact? Does it help at all? Or what you're feeling around why that was done?
it's a little bit of a head scratcher. I mean, the executive order we've had it for a few days. I've had an opportunity to sit with it a little bit.
Mhm.
The the up top, what I'll say is it's not a substitute for the bill. It doesn't do the same thing as the
Can
bill.
you explain it so I didn't explain it well? So you have this bill, this is one of the bills that was in front. And then the governor came out with an executive order that covered some of the topics in the bill, but how does explain that so I am getting it right?
Yeah. So let me back up. The statute that we had hoped to get into law would basically
Yeah,
say we're not saying ICE can't enforce immigration law in the state. We
of
couldn't say
course.
that constitutionally. What we can say is that if you're going to come into Virginia's courthouses to enforce immigration law, no matter who you are, you're not going to do that unless you have a judicial warrant. That's all the bill said, right?
Yep,
The EO says something completely different. As to executive agency buildings, like I don't know, the office building for the Department of Transportation, whatever,
right.
those buildings, they're applying kind of the same rule. Like they're saying you can't enforce immigration law without a warrant in executive branch buildings. But as to, other protected locations, courthouses, public schools, government-run hospitals, Commonwealth attorneys' offices, all the EO says is we're going to put together some work groups, and those work groups are going to come up with some guidance about how employees at those places should interact if and when they see ICE. There's no indication that the CEO would put any obstacle in place to immigration
Protect
enforcement or
people.
arrests. So I just want to clarify, the EO doesn't even aim to do the same thing that the bill did.
Okay. So why was that was just something to look like doing something? Or what do you, I mean, I don't know, right? Well, I want to back up to everybody here what you very much said at the beginning, that this is about when people think, oh, well, I'm not an immigrant, I don't have to worry. What we have seen from the very beginning of this administration is the undermining of our due process. And we try to get that across to voters on anything that what our Constitution protects us from, and that they're trying to erode those rights. And we see that in a lot of the amendments of the 14th Amendment and the Voting Rights Act, all these gutting protections. Due process is the one that, I mean, should scare the hell out of everybody, right? Somebody could enter your home without a warrant. And or they can, like you said, show up without any kind of warrant. And who do we know these people are? How do we protect ourselves if we've got anybody approaching us and taking us? So, in that sense of the bill and the scope of what was put forth in front of the governor or even the legislature, was this just one bill? There were other bills. Did you want to talk about some successes? But in that context, there's that question. Then where do we go from here? Because we know we're going to be voting. And I heard there was the bill about that this would also cover our voting places and also just maybe schools and such, so people couldn't go into schools and take kids, or is that a whole different bill? When we want to protect safe spaces, was this the same bill as safe spaces, or was this just courthouses?
Yeah, this bill covered a lot of different types of locations. It
So it
applied
was different
slightly different
locations.
rules in different places because there are just
Okay,
some constitutional parameters that are different. But it did, you're right, it covered voting locations,
okay.
facilities where, for example, recounts or vote certifications would take place. And so again, rather than having those protections in law, we have the promise of work groups that aren't working on any particular time frame that we know of, and we don't know what guidelines might come out. So for all the reasons that Bryn just laid out earlier,
Hotline. Mhm.
incredibly troubling, the timing
Really
and
troubling.
the frankly, the bending of the knee. I mean, I think that that's such a useful concept for this
Yes.
particular action. I know we were talking much higher level on
Yeah.
national, like federal fascist threats, but this is where the rubber meets the road. State policy can either stand up to a federal administration that has no respect for the rule of law and is actively hostile to democracy, or we can send the message that, look, we think states and our localities really can't do anything about it, and the feds are welcome to do what they want when they intrude into our processes. And that's what I'm afraid has happened here.
You laid that out quite articulately, beautifully to put it together, and it, of course, frightening in the sense that we have these opportunities. That there's any lessons we learned when we go back in time, when we look at decisions, point decisions that get consequences. Merrick Garland, you just go back in time. Citizens United, like that we see the consequences of that today. Not acting on this, and we know what we're heading into. When Trump has these election deniers coming into the states, he called them an army. You have people fleeing the country, like Bryn, losing great talent because of the threat to life. So with all this kind of downer here, the double bird goes to anybody bending the knee, let's say it. Is there still time to approach this governor in this time frame where you said maybe, is there any way to return and see what could be done? Or what are your thoughts on that? And then what we could do to help with that?
So I have two thoughts. I mean, just as a purely procedural technical reality, we still don't have a state budget. I mean,
True.
technically speaking, the GA and the governor could introduce legislation on any number of things during a special session while they're doing the budget. Am I optimistic? Have I heard that there's a plan to do any of that? No. But I mean, that is a potential.
Okay. Yeah.
But the other thing that I want to highlight, and it's something that I've been reflecting on quite a lot this week because of so much more than the bill that I talked about
Great.
got tanked. Um, there is broad frustration and concern across our center-left coalition, let's call it. Labor is obviously livid
Yeah.
about the veto of collective bargaining. Even things in the so-called affordability agenda, like prescription drug affordability board, like that, these things that are supposed to hold the center-left coalition together ideologically are all across the board being tanked by this administration. And so
Hmm.
that's troubling, but it also, to me, signals that there may be an opportunity for our coalition to really get activated and come together with a unified front rather than being siloed into our individual issues. So, is that a short-term strategy? Is that the next couple months? Probably not. But I think that that's something that we all need to think very deeply together about over the next 3 years while this administration is in power.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And going into a midterm, we came off this really hard yes campaign and did all this around that to try to protect as much as we could. And then, we know we have an election not that far away. And then this doesn't help with that kind of momentum and thinking, like you said, that kind of broad, I don't know what you call it, attack or what the word is on the left coalition of ideas that we would see in these bills, and then they're kind of gutted out. Added more criminal penalties, like on cannabis, when you saw the stuff that feels like very racial. That, okay, why are we upping or lowering the standard for criminality when we know what's happening? So a lot of it's concerning. So I love that maybe we can continue the conversation in our coalition about what we can do in a positive way for community. So thank you so much. Well, I want to make sure that we leave on a high note. Anything, I think you're doing some stuff in Hampton Roads, maybe one fun event. We have Pride Month coming up, and then we'll go to our next segment. Chris, what do you got?
Yeah,
Don't you have an event? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be
Couple.
celebrating Pride Month all month. Our organizers will be active in Hampton Roads. I believe Norfolk has some events. I don't have the date right in front of me.
I think we have it in there. We'll put it
Yeah,
in
we'll
for
get it out in
the.
the chat. But yeah, please join us for that. Across the state too. I believe we've got some stuff happening in Roanoke as well as out in Nova. So really, really important to build that solidarity and the positive events as well while we're
Yes.
all facing
Yeah.
encroaching fascism.
Yeah. How about that? We have to have fun, even under fascism. Well, thank you, Chris. Little levity there. Thank you so much, everybody. Give him a great round of applause. We say double clicks. And thank you so much for being here. And coming up next, Robin Warner. Let's talk about something where we can talk about community. And remember, raised hands, save those for the after chat, Jean. Go ahead, Robin. We're going to talk about the Women's Summit and the Expo.
Yes. Well, this year we have all sorts of new features in the Women's Summit. We've done it for 10 years, and this year is going to be fabulous. In fact, we need this Women's Summit, especially after this Friday Power Lunch. So, one of the new exciting features this summit is our Shop, Live, Vote Your Values Expo. We're weaving a curated marketplace and advocacy space into the very heart of the Women's Summit, where values aligned businesses, grassroots organizations, makers, authors, advocates connect with the people who need them most. We all know that democracy isn't only shaped at the ballot box, it's shaped by how we live, where we gather, and who we choose to support. Now, leading this expo, and I want is our Laura's. We have Laura Mack and Laura Richardson's. We have Double Trouble Laura Power doing this expo. And I want to start off. Laura, can you tell us a bit more about the theme of this expo?
Yeah, I love the theme, and especially in light of what Bryn said, I left that feeling like I want to do everything in my power to fight back against the fascists and the oligarchs. And so our theme is actually conscious consumption, which is all about you using your power as a consumer to support businesses that align with your values and to avoid the businesses that don't, like the oligarch owned businesses.
All right. So, how is it going to be organized? What can we expect to see when we get to the Women's Summit?
We're going to have three main areas. One is shop. It's shop, vote, live your values. The shop area is going to highlight smaller and some women-owned businesses that we know share our values, and it's going to offer some creative products that you can buy on site, but there'll also be some that do online business that you can take home and continue to shop. Then there's going to be the live area, and in the live area, we're going to especially explore ways for you to repair and reuse what you already have. So you're saving some money and you're being kind to the earth. And then we have the vote section, which is more of our traditional advocacy fair. But we want you to know the organizations and the candidates and also the policies that we need to advocate that align with your values.
Okay, can you give us a little sneak peek of who we might expect to see there? I mean, I'm not going to hold you to it, but who might we see?
Yeah, so we're still recruiting vendors, which you're going to hear about in a second, but we do have a very popular local bookstore lined up, and we might have a vendor of some upcycled jewelry if you can see what I'm wearing.
Fabulous. Okay, now you've all gotten a taste of this. Maybe you're thinking, I know a vendor that absolutely should be there, or I want to help with this because this is right up my alley. Laura Mack, how can people get involved?
Well, the first thing they can do is send an email to me, and my email is in the chat, and we would love to hear from you, and we'll respond immediately. Thanks.
All right, Katherine, we're throwing it back to you. Oh, wait,
Yes.
and get your ticket to the Women's Summit if you want to be a part of this.
Get your ticket. Also, the sponsorship package will be released soon, and we really tickets are one serious great way to sponsor, and also sponsoring a ticket for somebody else. So let's bring up Fennell, and thank you, Robin. We'll round up the show. I know there's probably a lot to talk about. All right. Well, double bird. That's what I want to do. I'm getting my double bird shirt because I'm just pissed. I can't take it.
So let me just say this that I think is really important, because I do think I think our presentations have been great today. But this is probably the best example of a tightrope. And I think that Chris was really, the way that he was talking about things is exactly how we have to sort of figure out how to negotiate and get through these conversations. And I think that coalitions are probably the best way. When I hear Chris talk about some of these things and the way that he talks about them, I know that most people in the circles that I'm in have no idea how it connects and what it means.
Right.
And that's why, this whole notion of talking and knocking far and wide matter. But that means you have to have an understanding of stuff to be able to connect the dots so that everyday people see how it connects to their life. And I just
Yeah.
think that that's critical. And it's also critical to what Bryn was saying. I'm going to say this because I won't be here for the after chat, but it's making injustice public. How do we do that right now? I think Minneapolis
Right.
was a perfect example of people seeing these things happening to Americans, people who were like their neighbors, and they reacted to it. So we've got to do that. And I do think that there are more of us than them. And I think the more of us than them that actually see what's happening, understand what's happening when we're talking to them, showing them, being in the spaces where they are, that it will
Right.
matter. And I also think most importantly, we have got to figure out how to give more double birds. But I'm making a joke with that. But just to say we have to be bolder. We have to be bolder and we have to speak louder and we have to stand up for what we believe.
Last year at the Women's Summit, we gave I think we had an award a badass award, and we will continue doing that. And we gave it to Jennifer Boysko for standing up to power, her own party. And this, we'll have to give the double bird award, I think. I think we're going to have the badass and the double bird. No, I think it's going to have two birds on it. That's all. Well,
Yeah,
but I'm going to say one thing that I think it's on my mind as well. And I agree with, what we do really well is communicate with people. I think the other side of it, what Chris was talking about, is how we hold people accountable as well, meaning that we did go talk to people and people went and voted for these things. These things are on the table. And then for a lot of us, we're kind of stunned into sort of like feeling a certain way because we're like, okay, we did all this. Y'all have your job. Like we said this before, you elected, you're up there. This is your job. Do it well. People need to come out of their silos. Doors should be open and people should be talking. I think that's where I would like to see an adult delegation go is get out of the ego, get into the room and get this going. But this is up to the people like the governor to have the door open. And I would just say it again. I want people to succeed. I'm saying this because I want success for everybody. I'm saying it because I want to protect people, and especially people like Bryn who had to flee our country. Immigrants should not be scared to come out of their homes. Kids going to school worrying about their parents. This is, voting rights gutted. And I'm going to say these attacks on Vidman, a congressman, just going to vote for this anti-trans bill, putting and the federal law now being able to go into state school, go into local schools to tell people what to do. I have to just say, what the hell? Today he gets my double bird.
he
And
gets he gets the double
he
bird.
gets my double bird today. I'm just saying. So for everybody else, if that makes you, if you like what you saw today, support the show. We are, again, we run on Steam every day. And I saw that menopause bill didn't pass either. And I'm telling you why it didn't. They had a bill about menopause and perimenopause. It's because they're so afraid of women that they just don't understand that that what they would do with all of that sweat energy. Just saying.
You know
Um,
what I tell you,
what?
menopause is a superpower. I'm just
It's a
saying.
superpower, but they're like, well, we can't put that into law. You imagine every woman having that power to say to say the AC had to be at 65, Just AC in every federal building, 65. Anywho, no, so I hope everybody takes that with the kind of fun it's supposed to be intended. But yes, thank you all. Subscribe and thank you to our guest today, Brent Tannehill. Get her book. Thank you for your service to our country. And we are sisters and friends on this side still in the United States. You could always lean on us. And Chris Kaiser, what I have to say, we have to have Chris back. I just am just impressed just with everything about this advocacy, civil rights expert, lover of freedom. I think we are really in a great place with having somebody like Chris being the representative from ACLU Virginia. So thank you, Chris, for being here. And for our Women's Summit, get the ticket, buy a ticket, be a sponsor. We have the Big Ten Badass sponsor. I'd love to see a lot of badass sponsors. And then we have also the Gloves Up sponsor that are available right now online. And then the bigger package, if you're ACLU or an organization and want to sponsor or be in our values expo, make sure you reach out. All right, with that wrap, Fennell is going to hit the road. Stay for a few minutes in the after chat so we can wave bye to you. And then let's roll it, Denis, and get to the other side this rainy day. Oh.